Tape Deck Media.
Good morning, Roddlemaniacs and Rodaholics. Welcome back to another episode of Roddle Me This. I am, as always, your host, the Wizard of Wordplay, Taylor Roddle. I hope you've been having a good week so far. I hope you had a good weekend, and I hope you've got something exciting happening later on in the week. Just looking at my calendar now, I actually don't have any plugs to get in. I've got a pretty standard week coming up myself, although I'm doing a cool little corporate Beats by Bingo event on Friday, which should be a bit of fun. So with all that out of the way, I suppose we can just get straight into the topic at hand today. I'm going to talk for a little bit about my last year, because I think by the time this episode drops, I will have been officially self-employed as a, what does my tax thing say? Variety entertainer, that's what it is. I will have officially been a variety entertainer for the last year. So off the bat, I made it. I've managed to stay off the streets for a year, just paying my bills off the back of my savings and then what money I cobbled together through being a variety entertainer. So the way I'm going to structure this is I've written down a few questions that I think most people would have had for me about what it's been like for a year as a I'll say comedian going forward. So I've got a few questions that I think other comedians and other people that are considering quitting their day job to do something similar might have. And then I've just written down a sort of observations or positives and negatives, things to be aware of. I've got some points, and those will be in the show notes to give you an idea of what I'm going to cover in the chat coming up. So the first of these burning questions that I think is probably on all of your minds, so you can listen to this and then immediately close out, is did I make any money this year? And the answer to that is yes and no. I had a look at how much I earned, or how much my contract said that I earned at my day job working 40 hours a week. And then Henry, the app that I use for the accounting as a freelancer, said that I made 90% of that wage off the back of my freelance. So yes and no. I took a hit to my earnings, and I think I also had to spend a lot of money. That's a point that I'll come back to later on. One of my points is you've got to spend money to make money. And unfortunately, the fact of the matter is I didn't have a lot of gear when I started, so I'm still having to purchase things and, purchase services, book accommodation, flights, everything like that. So there is a significant sort of startup cost involved in doing what I've been doing. But I made I made a little bit of money. I made almost as much money as I did when I was working an admittedly very badly paid graphic design job. Second question I think everybody wants to know is how much of my runway did I burn through in this 1 year? I predicted that the amount of money that I saved would get me through the year, and I used about half of it. So at the end of this year, I could probably go for another year off that kind of runway, and I would probably be okay. Third question is some people wanted to know what kind of sacrifices I had to make, how has my lifestyle changed, that kind of thing, and my lifestyle changed very little, I think would be the answer to that. That being said, I should preface this by saying, I mentioned this in my my last sort of Q&A about going full-time, but I am a pretty frugal person. I don't tend to spend money. The thing I splash out on money for myself is definitely food. That's my Achilles heel of spending money is definitely on food. So what I mean for that is I suppose my cost of living is not as high as some people out there's might be. I drive a very economical car, very small car. I don't tend to go out drinking with friends. I don't tend to do a lot of socializing that requires you spending money. A lot of my socializing tends to be just small gatherings at somebody's house. Just trying to think of what other things people might spend money on. I don't wear makeup. I've been painting my nails every now and then, but that's not like an everyday thing. I haven't really gone away on like a big holiday or a trip. Like I don't spend my money on travel. I know that can be a thing that people spend their money on, but I guess what I'm getting at here is I haven't had to change my lifestyle very much at all. But that being said, I don't really tend to live that expensive of a lifestyle to begin with. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about doing this for yourself, what things you could cut out in order to tighten the belt, as they say. So the next question people might be wondering, especially if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, is me complaining about my RSI, the aching in my hands. And I suppose I'll just lump that all together as how is my health doing? So actually lately I have to say my hands are feeling, compared to how bad they were, they're feeling like quite good. I very rarely have any issues with my right hand anymore. And for my left hand, it just seems to be the middle joint is like stiff, I guess. It is a little bit painful, but it just feels like, I'm not quite sure, like it feels like if I stretch it around a little bit, this is great for the audio listeners, I'm flexing and moving my thumb around now, but yeah, it's not painful like I used to get shooting pains going down my thumbs, and I could barely use the computer for a couple of hours before they would start aching. And so just in general, they're feeling a lot better. I definitely still get stiff hands if I use the computer for a lot. If I spend the whole day on the computer doing graphics or editing videos or something, they'll definitely come away from that being a bit stiff. But I'm starting to think that might actually just be a consequence of getting older and being unrelated. Like, that's just another thing that happens to me. So I've been trying to be careful, trying to stay off the computer when I can, and stretch them and everything. I've been icing them a bit lately, alternating between ice and heat. But honestly, in general, my hands feel pretty good these days. They don't bother me nearly as much as they used to. My other health in general is, I can actually talk about this now. I've purchased myself a bicycle because I noticed that I live, like where my house is kind of on the other end of a really nice cycle path that goes into the city. And so I thought, that could be great. That's about 14 kilometers or something, 14, 15 kilometers. So I thought that could be a really good way for me to get some exercises by cycling into town for comedy gigs and quizzes and stuff like that. So I had a bit of a shop around on Trade Me, Facebook Marketplace, and I ended up picking up a bike a couple of days ago at the time of this recording. By the time this drops, it'll be a week or two later. And I went for a bike last night, and wow, I am a lot less fit than I thought I was. With a little bit of context here, I used to bike to work and to school and stuff pretty much every day when I was living in Japan, and I think that might have been a couple of kilometers to town from my house. And then I would also quite often bike to my partner at the time's house, which was 40 minutes by cycle. Bicycle, get it? Great joke. But yeah, I managed to pick that up, and I remember the first day I got my bicycle over there, I biked from my house to the guy whose house I was staying with, my coworker, and that was about 10 kilometers or something, and I did that with no with no issue. And then last night, by the time I'd done 2 kilometers on the bike, I was just cooked. I had nothing left. So I've been doing like cardio. I've been walking a lot, been walking in the gym, that kind of thing where I can. But yeah, a bit of a rude awakening there to realizing how unfit I actually am. So I'm optimistic with the bike. That'll just be good for my health, good for my wallet. Petrol's crazy expensive at the moment, and even when you're driving like a cheap little car like mine, you still feel the hit of that, filling that up every week. So I'm very much looking forward to my my bicycle journey, I guess you could call it. The other question people might have is, how is the podcast doing? Like, how when did I start? I've been doing the podcast for a couple of years now, I think. We're just coming up on around 70, well, not 70 episodes, but 70 things you can listen to on the feed. So it must just be over a year. So if you've been listening, you'll know that I've signed with Tape Deck Media, which is owned by Dan Bublitz Jr., I was a fan of his for a very long time before getting in touch about this. And overall, I have to say I'm very happy on Spreaker. The analytics are a little bit harder for me to figure out on Spreaker. I did really enjoy Buzzsprouts, which was my previous host's. Oh, my foot just fell asleep. Oh, jeez. Okay. I'll probably leave that in because that is quite funny. I got pins and needles in my foot all of a sudden. Just when I'm talking about how my health is getting better, suddenly my foot falls asleep. Imagine if I had a heart attack on the podcast. That would be that'd be a great twist of irony. All right, back. I really shouldn't dilly-dally. I don't want to waste the precious listeners' time. So how's the podcast doing? It's all right. I think we have about somewhere between 10 and 20 regular listeners every week based on the download statistics. Spotify seems to think I have 52 followers, but that is certainly not reflected in the in the download numbers, so I don't know where Spotify is getting that information from. Funnily enough, I just got an email from from Chartable, which is a podcast chart website, and they reckon that the podcast got 32 plays last week. So yeah, I don't know, maybe if my numbers say 10 to 20, Spotify say 52, then 32 people listening sounds about right, I suppose. But the actual podcast has been good. I'm really happy with the Tiny Joys format. I think that's probably what I'm going to keep doing going forward, because that's very easy to explain to people. It was always really hard to explain to people, like, yeah, I do this podcast where my guest comes on and they talk about a thing that they're really into, or like a movie that really, it was just too much. So just being able to tell people now, I do a podcast where the guests bring on 5 mundane tiny joys from their life and we talk about it is it's a lot easier of a sell. And I've noticed my guests, they really like being able to talk about things that make them happy, and it often reminds them of what they enjoy in their own life. So I think it's just a positive it's just a positive thing to be doing. We've also got Hosstown with my friend Matt Lilly. We've done 1 episode of that, and we're due to record another one soon. Numbers from that look all right. They're doing okay on YouTube, actually. They've gotten more views than most other things that I have put up on YouTube, podcast-wise anyways. I guess my answer to the podcast question is, it seems like it's going well. I've heard that podcasts take something like 4 years to become profitable, or to what would you call it, to make it or whatever. So I think, I'm happy with how we're doing for how long I've been doing it for. Alrighty, so we'll move on to some of these things to be aware of, positive, negatives. I'm not quite sure what to call them. Just stuff observations that I've observed from my year of being a freelance entertainer. Now, this might not be relevant to you. You might be in the position of thinking you want to take your hobby, quit your job and take your hobby to be your main job. So not all of this will be super relevant to you. This might all be. It might be. It might be pretty relevant to comedians, musicians. I think it will be quite relevant to actors. Maybe not so much, as I don't know how much of that tends to cross over. It'll be if your art form or whatever it is tends to have to rely on putting on shows or performances for the public, and you tend to work with a lot of bars and pubs and hotels and that kind of thing, then a lot of this might be quite relevant to you. So the first thing on my list, and easily the biggest takeaway that I've learned from doing this for a year, is that being a freelance entertainer is all about maintaining relationships and weeding out the people who aren't worth your time. So this is a big one. The person who, if you're like me and you work with venues, generally you have a point of contact that will be like the events manager, or in a lot of places it's the manager, the duty manager, or the owner of the place often does it. But in my experience, those are hard ones to work for, because the owners the owners that are trying to do everything are way harder to get a hold of, and they're overworked. So I look at that as a little bit of a red flag if it's like one of those owner operators that try to do everything. Again, take it with a grain of salt. I've worked with some owner operators who were fantastic and on top of it, but the general trend seems to be those people are stressed and overworked and hard to contact and forgetful. I always kind of jokingly say, if when you ask a venue, who do I send the invoice to? And then they send you an email that's like accounts@companyname.co.nz. That's always like a green flag to me, because it means you've got somebody that their only job is making sure the accounts get taken care of, which generally means you're going to get paid on time. Something that'll come along with this, when I say you'll learn which places are worth your time, I've had to ask myself a lot, like, is the stress of having to constantly chase up invoices or, last minute communication mishaps and that sort of thing, is this stress that I'm taking on worth the money that I'm getting from working with this venue or person? And quite often, if you're having to ask yourself that, the answer is probably no. I don't want to make it seem like it's all doom and gloom as well. Like, there are genuinely some really, really efficient, organized, like on the ball people out there who are running venues. It's just a matter of finding them and then, coming together and figuring out a working relationship or whatever that is mutually beneficial to both of you. There's nothing worse when there's nothing worse than when you're. It's almost like, honestly, it is almost like relationships. Like, when you're not feeling it, but they want to keep trying, and you will feel really bad for like sort of ending things, but at the same time, like, this is literally your livelihood, so you have to be quite ruthless with your time. And something I've learned a lot is like venues or managers, they'll want kind of like your exclusivity on things, but they don't they don't necessarily want to pay you like the pay they want to give you sometimes doesn't reflect that kind of feeling. Like, I've had in negotiations, people sort of want to if let's say I've got something on a Wednesday, they say, well, we want Wednesdays as well, and then you go, well, okay, maybe we can figure it out, but like, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? And they aren't. So like, yeah, you just have, it's not personal. That's probably the biggest lesson I've had, and I still have a chip on my shoulder for this, but like, for business, like, nothing's personal. That's literally the saying, is it's just business. And I often have to remind myself that because I really have a chip on my shoulder for, I don't know where this comes from as such, but I'll take things as insults when they aren't intended to be. So I often have to remind myself, like, it's not malicious, it's not personal. It like just happened because this person is busy and like, they've got 10 other things they're trying to do. And so by them being like flippant or hard to contact, it's not because they're doing it on purpose. It's just how things are. The upswing to this is when you find those people out there who are switched on and organized, and it's a mutually beneficial like situation for both. It's just effortless. Like, I'm not going to name and shame any ones that I've worked with who have not been so good to deal with, but one that I can unreservedly say I've really enjoyed working with is Moi Moi, the Mexican cantina on Wells Street. I've been with them for about a year running the quiz night. We've run comedy nights there. I think that's all I've done with them. We were trying to get Beats by Bingo set up, but there was a sort of turf there was a turf thing. I couldn't sort of get that going. But yeah, they've just been a dream to work with. Like, they pay on time. They they actually lift a finger to help promote the events. They're easy to contact. Like, yeah, they've been a fantastic company to work with. And the great thing is, once you've found these people that are switched on, good to work with, mutually beneficial, it just works. You don't have to worry about it. It's just keep putting in, you keep putting in your mahi, and I can assure you they will definitely want to hold on to you. Because that's the thing I think a lot of entertainers forget is a lot of venues will try to convince us that we are not bringing value to their establishment, but you are. I won't name this one, but I had a particularly nasty blowout with the management of one place, and what annoyed me so much about it was the staff were really like dismissive and rude, and then meanwhile we were bringing in like 7 or 8 tables of people every week that would not have been in there without our event. And again, I probably took it more personal than I should have, but that's the game. A lot of the time, it's about leverage. Who's got more leverage on who? And that's the whole idea of negotiations. That's why it's hard to negotiate with someone if you don't have anything you can take away from them. Like, as ruthless as that sounds, if you've got nothing over someone, if you've got no value, no leverage, nothing to offer, then nothing's going to stop them from walking away. But then likewise, if you know you're bringing value and you like they don't want to lose the value, then you're in quite a strong negotiating position there to renegotiate terms, get better stuff. You know, it's just you're in a good spot there. So sort of following on from that, the next one is that you're going to learn is waiting for companies or venues to pay you is going to be, well, it can be a nightmare is what I should say. So if you're coming from the world of like working for a company 40 hours a week, you're going to be very used to getting a paycheck on the same night of the week, every week, you know, without fail. And as you'll all know, it's a big deal if the company misses payday. And then for me, my own experience of freelancing was through doing graphic design. I was in quite a good position there, come back to leverage. You would do the work for someone, and then I was able to just sort of hold the files hostage until they paid me. You know, you didn't put it like that to people, but you would just write an email saying, all right, you know, you've signed off on the design, great. Once the invoice clears, I'll send you over your final files, and we'll put a bow on it, and that's it, done. The tricky thing with venues, and I think this is just a hospitality thing in general, is rather than it being done in like a weekly cycle, it's more like monthly cycle. So most venues that I know will handle their accounts like once a month, and it really sucks if if your billing cycle doesn't line up with theirs. You can obviously work around this, like Austin Club, another one that I'm happy to name because they're great to work with. I just found out what day they handle their accounts, and I just schedule my invoice for them a couple of days before, and it's all been great. But quite often with entertainment, rather than you doing, like, you do a show, then they pay you for the show, then you do another show and they pay you for that show. It's like, quite often, it's, you got to do 4 shows, and then you put your invoice to them, and like, the sort of default Henry invoice due date is set to 3 weeks, which I still haven't really figured out the legality on when people are required to pay their invoices, but it seems like the generally accepted terms are about a month. So then what happens is you've got to do another 4 shows before you even get paid for the first 4 you did. And then by that time rolls around, you're sending your next invoice in. So you're always kind of like a month behind. And I'm still getting used to this. I'm not quite there yet. Like I said, if you've got places you trust and you know they're going to pay you on time and they're going to pay you in a timely fashion, it's not a big deal. But for the ones that you just expect them to sort of cut and run, you kind of apply a bit of pressure for them to at least pay the first couple on time so that you know they're not going to like stiff you. So there's a lot of trust involved. I think generally places, like, I've never worked with places that necessarily tried to like not pay me, but I think it was more disorganization on their end. But it's still one thing that I find really frustrating is the fact that we're always like, we're basically working for like 2 months for free before we get paid for the first month. So this is something I need to look into with this year, is find out what my entitlements are, because I reckon, you know, by the time you've done 4, like, they should really have to pay you in the next week for that first invoice. But yeah, I don't know. That's just, again, maybe it's just one of those things where that's just how it works, and no amount of me complaining about it's going to change anything. But yeah, like I said, just something to be aware of if you're going to do this yourself. So following on from that, the next one is you need to be on top of your calendar or your schedule and be thinking ahead. You will get very frustrated with other people's lack of organization. So I think I've kind of covered this basically with that last point. But there's just one thing to note is like, when I was a kid, I never realized how much of my life was going to be wasted just trying to get people to respond to an email. Like, it's gotten to the point with like certain clients in the past, I've honestly had to think about like, okay, so it's Thursday now, it's 3:00. If I send this invoice or this important question, they're already going to be in like end of the day mode. And it's Thursday, so they're probably going to be even more kind of like lackadaisical about it. So it's just going to get ignored. And then Friday rolls around, and Friday's like, you know, Friday's a busy day for hospitality places in the first place, but also people are sort of weirdly on like holiday mode in general. So in many cases, I would just go, screw it, I'm just going to schedule the email for Monday morning at 10 in the morning, because then you know that's when that's when you've got the highest chance of them actually seeing it and responding to it. So then on the other side of this coin is something I've sort of had to learn for myself a little bit is you're not obligated to respond straight away. Like, and this is going to sound weird, me just being annoyed that people weren't responding to emails, but the cases that I get frustrated with it are when, like, we've got an event on Friday and you need an answer quickly from the venue, and they don't get back to you until Thursday, and then by that point it's too late to do anything about it. So, like, take this with as much salt as you want, but, like, I suppose what I mean is, like, within reason, don't feel like you need to be always available, especially in the evenings and stuff like that. I would recommend having a separate email address for your freelance hustlings, and possibly not even be able to access that on your phone. I'm pretty good at not checking. Well, I'll see them come in, but I don't tend to feel the need to respond to work emails until the next kind of business, the next business hours. Obviously, again, big asterisks on this one. Obviously, certain things are urgent, certain things come up, but, like, in general, just don't feel like you're pressured to respond straight away to stuff. You can take a night or a couple of days to think about it. I've also noticed even just telling the person in a response, I'm gonna take a couple of days and have a think about it, and I'll get back to you, is it's almost like one of those tricks. Like, I didn't realize you were allowed to do that. I thought you just had to kind of, like, I felt like maybe that was breaking the fourth wall, and you had of the negotiation, and you had to, like, I don't know. It's just something I've learned. Just you can do that. Next item on my list is you're going to feel like you're shouting into the void a lot. This is more like pertinent for people that are also trying to post content online. Like, if you've been listening to the podcast, I've recently gotten into TikTok. I'm trying to make TikTok content online, and I know a lot of I'm not going to take credit for necessarily kickstarting the wave of content, but I was definitely among the first few Kiwi comedians to start posting clips online. And now there's a good handful of us like consistently uploading clips every week. The dumb thing about this is I feel like a bit of an idiot, because right when my RSI stuff was kicking off was when I was also wasting a lot of time manually adding subtitles to my videos, only for, like, literally less than a year later, CapCut and other AI stuff have got it down to where it's so good that you just click one button and it transcribes it, and then it all matches up with where you're talking in the video. And I just feel like a hell of a rube with all that time I wasted right at the end of that kind of dark age of automatic captions. But just in general, with posting stuff online, it's hard, it's demoralizing, and like I said, you're gonna feel like you're just yelling into the void. Like, I've been looking up like tips for TikTok, and some people they'll write things, but they'll be like, oh yeah, I posted my first video on this account and I used no hashtags and I got like 12k views on it, and you're like, what the hell? Like, how did you do that? And I'm just scrolling through my TikTok feed now, and, like, most of my stuff gets about 200 views, although lately they've been more like 500 to 700, which is an odd space to be in, because I've also tried to upload stuff to YouTube before, and my YouTube videos were getting like 10 views, if that. So it's all kind of relative, I guess, because, when you upload stuff to TikTok, I think views are relatively cheap. The thing that they want you to be focusing on is how much they're being shared and commented on. That seems to be the metric that they if you're getting a lot of comments and a lot of shares, that's when they'll start pushing your videos to other people. And you'll quite often spend a lot of time staring at your content being like, what am I doing so differently to these other channels that, like, it's not grabbing people? And that's one thing I've been working on a lot, is trying to get the hook a lot better in the content that I've been putting online, because people just have such short attention spans now. You have to really, really grab them in the first couple of seconds. And my view counts are slowly going up, so maybe this time next year I'll have a decent kind of following on there. But I think every creative out there who's been posting stuff to TikTok has been looking at your, 250 views seems to be like rock bottom. That's like the TikTok throwing you a bone just for uploading a video. But like, yeah, I'll push this in front of a couple of people, and then we'll end it. And I imagine, yeah, well, would you just sit there and you're like, what am I doing wrong? And like, the frustrating thing is, your stuff's funny and you've got a bit of talent in what you do. And you always think to yourself, like, if I could just get this in front of people, then they would all like get on board. But yeah, it's a grind and it's a slog, and you're gonna feel like no one's listening, no one's paying attention. But yeah, I hope I can offer some more insight into this. Maybe in a year's time. I'm really trying to focus on pushing some content online at the moment, so I might have some more insight to give in about a year. I guess the main thing I wanted to say is like, that's how we all feel. Like, don't feel like it's just you that's feeling like you're shouting into the void and no one's listening. I think we all feel like that at times. So this has been an interesting one, is you might find planning activities outside of work too exhausting to bother with. And I think this is referred to as decision fatigue, something along those lines. And I've noticed, because I spend all week having to coordinate emails and dates and shows and ticketing links, and I got to get this page online, and I got to launch this marketing campaign, and I got to post this at 4 o'clock, I got to post this at 7 o'clock, I got to edit, like, it's just constantly in your head, that I find when the opportunity, someone will say, oh, we should get together sometime, we should hang out, we should do this, we should go for a picnic, people will suggest things. And I just think to myself, God, I've just spent all day planning and plotting and scheming, all this stuff. Like, the last thing I want to have, because that's what will frustrate you, is people leave it in your court. And I'm sure we all do this. Like, it's a way to be considerate. Like, let someone know you're open to the idea of hanging out, but I don't want to push it on you. I just want to, like, make the intent known. But the problem is when you're doing this, it's like you're not even tired. It's just like you can't be bothered making another decision. So it's very interesting, but just something to be aware of. That probably will happen to you too. And in general, I found the solution to this actually just tell the person, look, I spend all week doing this sort of thing. Like, if you leave it up to me, it's not going to happen because I'm tired and I'm fatigued of having to plan and make decisions. So just pick a time, pick a day. I'll tell you if I'm free. If I'm free, great. If I'm not, I'll suggest an alternative date, and then boom, we're done. And that's been working relatively well for me. Finally, one that's a little more positive is every day is different. You're going to experience some of the weirdest gigs and jobs that you never saw yourself doing. I'll give you a great example of this. One that we were, so when I say we, me, Henry Hickman, and Jared Cook, these two other local comics, we refer to ourselves as the Three Laughsketeers. We were lucky enough to be asked to do a performance at the Relay for Life, which is a Cancer Society fundraiser this year. And we basically went there and we attempted to do like stand-up comedy for the people running. But we pretty quickly realized most people, by the time we showed up about 5 o'clock in the evening, most people weren't even really hearing us. They were just so focused on put one foot in front of the other. We had to sort of change our strategy a little bit, and we ended up having a chat to people in the crowd, asking who people were running for. We're sort of just, I guess we kind of just turned into like roving interviewers. And it was funny because the gig didn't exactly go great. Like, I got no laughs. I got 0 laughs for that whole performance. But it was so much fun. Like, we went away from it a little bit like, oh geez, that was a rough one. But then we were just kind of chilling on the edge of the park, getting ready to leave, and I just felt this great sense of like gratitude, and I was just grateful to have shared that experience with those two guys. So that's one weird and wonderful gig that I've done. I'm hoping that we get to come back and do something next year. We'll probably restructure our performance a little bit. I think we're thinking what we'll do is we'll set up a table and almost be like unofficial broadcasters for the event, and we might be streaming it to like Facebook or Instagram or something, and we might send one of us around as kind of like a roving reporter thing. I think that's going to go a lot better than trying to make people laugh who are literally focusing so hard on not like puking and collapsing that they're not hearing anything else. Either that or I'm not funny, I'm not sure. I think I'm alright. The other moment I was hit with this was the other day, a couple of weeks ago now maybe actually, I have to be a little bit careful about this, but I've been doing some work for a company called Outstanding Performance, and they're basically just they supply actors to role play for training purposes. And so we do some work with the police, the military, and like medical staff. I can't really talk too much about it because it's a little bit of a low key. There's that whole doctor, confidentiality thing. But something I've been doing is as one of these actors. I always feel weird referring to myself as an actor, but I guess I am in a sense. And a couple of weeks ago, we were doing something at the hospital, and so that meant I had to get into town. And if you've lived in Christchurch at all, you'll know that parking for the hospital is horrific. Like, the best option is you park somewhere like around the other side of the Hagley Park, and then you catch a shuttle to the hospital or something. It's terrible. It's the dumbest thing ever. But anyway, it seemed like it would be easier to me to park at the Botanic Gardens and then walk about 15 minutes to get to the hospital. And that was great. Like I said, I've been trying to walk a little bit more. I was walking up to waddling up to the hospital. It was a nice sunny day. There was lots of bikes around. I was really happily surprised by how many bicycles were on the road. And like, the hospital to me is such a nostalgic Christchurch building. It's one of the few sort of like I don't want to call it a heritage building, but I guess if you've not lived in Christchurch, this is probably a bizarre experience to you. But like, we lost so many of our iconic buildings in the earthquakes that I almost picture it as like kind of old and new Christchurch. And the hospital to me is always kind of like one of the last few old Christchurch buildings that I can think of that's still kind of like around. And so I was waiting in one of the offices just for the thing to begin, and I was looking out over the rooftops of Christchurch, and I just thought to myself, like, this is mad that this is my job for the day, is to just be here and do this. And so again, I was just super grateful that I got this nice sunny walk to work, and then I got to spend a bit of time in this building that really fondly reminds me kind of my childhood. Like, one of my strongest memories of being a little kid was walking along there's like this little stone wall outside the Christchurch hospital, and it's like, that's been there for 30 years at this point. And I remember walking along it and running my hands kind of through the grooves in the bricks. And I was with my grandparents, and I think we were going to the hospital because my brother had just been born. And again, it was a bright sunny day. And I don't know why I have that memory, because I think you're not supposed to have memories when you're like under 5 or something. And I was about 2 years old when that happened. So yeah, I don't know why I have that memory still, but maybe that's why I had such a nostalgic moment returning back to the hospital that day. All right, we'll move on from that sappy from my nostalgia there. But yeah, I guess what I want to say is just like, it's so good. Just, you never know where you're going to be. You never know what you're going to be doing. And for someone like me, who I find routine to be a little bit of a cage a lot of the time, that is just really freeing to kind of not know where I'm going to be and what I'm doing. It also helps me be in the moment a little bit more, to have a varied workplaces and varied life, because I noticed when I was working in the same place every day, I would sort of go on autopilot a little bit, and I think life passes you by a little bit when you're kind of living like that. When you're kind of living like that, you're not necessarily taking in the world, and so yeah, that really helps me. Like, it helps me live in the moment more when I'm in new places, having new experiences. Oh, this podcast has gone on a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but I hope you're enjoying it. So the next one, you're going to experience hella ups and downs. You're going to feel like you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back a lot. So this is a tough one, and this is one of the harder things about doing this, is I suppose that's the other side of the coin for not knowing where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing, is obviously the anxiety of thinking that you're never going to work again. It tends to sink in a lot. Sort of linking back to the first point, I've recently sort of gone through and had a bit of a cull, and I've sort of finished up with working with a few places that I just felt like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, or like we mutually agreed that it like wasn't really working out like we'd hoped. So we sort of like, I try not to leave a venue on bad terms, because you always want to leave that door open, because you never know what's going to happen. The one thing about booking the tour with David is so many venues that I we used to do like a monthly or a weekly show with them, which we couldn't do anymore just due to various reasons. Ended up being a venue that we used on that tour simply because I'd kept that bridge open and they were willing to work with me again. So this sort of goes hand in hand with the shouting into the void thing. Is you'll look at your calendar and you'll think, oh geez, I'm looking a bit slim for gigs over the next couple of weeks, and then that's where the sort of the fear starts to creep in a little bit, and you think like, oh geez, am I going to have to like go back and get a job now? What am I going to do? But then it's tough because like you have to kind of trust that you're going to fill up those dates again, even though at the time you're probably going to think like, that's it, I'm done. Good example of this, like literally just this sort of next few weeks, I was looking at my calendar and thinking, oh geez, bit grim, haven't got many spots on, just got my usual kind of comedy gigs, nothing external, no corporates or anything. But then Beats by Bingo, I've sung their praises many times on this podcast. I've got about 3 or 4 like corporate work do private gigs coming up over the next few months, and so that definitely picks you up and helps you feel a bit better about what am I trying to say here? I guess my thing is don't give up until it's not over until it's over, is I guess what I'm trying to say here. Again though, nothing's guaranteed in this life, and I guess I can sort of tack this on. It's another point for the list, but it's like your business is going to be affected by things that are out of your hands, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. So I don't want to get too political here, but one of the things that happened in this first year of me being a full-time entertainer is we had a change of government in New Zealand, going from a left-wing party to a right-wing party. And even though the current parties that are in power often talk about like, all the right-wing stuff, trickle down, we want the average New Zealander to be healthy, wealthy, all that kind of thing. I don't really think the decisions they've been making line up with that very much at all. And we've been seeing that in the spending habits of people. So I've had a bit of a knock-on effect where people are feeling the crunch economically because fuel prices are high. I think, inflation is like we're also currently dealing with a thing in New Zealand now where we've got a supermarket duopoly. Both all the supermarkets are owned by 2 companies, and so that means they can basically just raise their prices as much as they want, and we foot the bill. So, like, again, without getting too political, we're in I hesitate to use the word cost of living crisis because I feel like that's a term that they throw at us to sort of like take the blame off the people that are really causing all the middle and lower class to get squeezed. So we'll just say we're in a economic state at the moment in the country. It's not good. Well, I mean, it's great if you're a landlord, but for bums like me, it's not very good. So these 2 things out of my control. I obviously didn't vote for the party that's in power now. The majority of New Zealanders thought that it would be best for the country. So again, out of my hands. Supermarket duopoly. Not a lot I can individually do to fix this, but so because of cost of living's high, inflation's high, wages aren't going up, rent's probably not going down either. People don't have the money to spend to go out to events, which then means that venues don't have the confidence to book quizzes, comedy nights, etc. And so my work, I take the hit there because the venue's taking the hit there because their customers are taking the hit there. And it's a bit like the pandemic, it's a bit like the earthquake, it's any natural disaster. There's just stuff that's going to be out of your hands that's going to, for lack of a better word, it's going to fuck your shit up. And unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do about it except just carry on and try to make the best of it. Just try to be as smart as you can, put away some money where you can, maintain your good relationships, because like once again, if a venue, ends your gig due to economic reasons and you don't blow up at them and tell all the comics in town to boycott them and make a post on social media talking about fuck them and fuck that, we've always supported them, and all the delightful things that comedians tend to like to do when a venue cuts them off. If you stay on good terms with them, then when they can, when the economy's doing a little better, people can afford to come out, they're looking to put on events, then you'll be the first one that they contact. So, yeah, you just have to weather the storm, I guess is the only way I can put it. And that's kind of what I'm experiencing at the moment. I'm having to be a little more careful with my spending, maybe not take as big a risks as I could when things were going a little bit better. I think that's also just kind of part of the ebb and flow of business, is you're going to have lean times, and you're going to, my old boss used to say, it's a feast or a famine. There's no in between. So just now I've finished my first cycle, so I've kind of seen what months were good, what months were bad. We've always known that March, January, March, April, May, and some of June are always hard for comedy, because the change of the season seems to stop people from coming out. It's getting colder. They just want to stay inside, finish 3 Body Problem on Netflix, whatever it is. And then alternatively, when it starts getting light earlier in summer, people want to go to the beach, they want to have barbecues. So the change of seasons is always hard for comedy. But luckily I've seen that quiz nights actually, maybe it's the reverse, going into the colder months. We've been really doing well with the quiz nights going into autumn. So I think winter and autumn seems to be a good quiz activity. So I guess something you can potentially do is just try to have as many legs to your stool as you can, so that if one leg falls out, you've got other legs to stand on. That's a good practical piece of advice. It's not just me moaning about the government and capitalism. So the next one, you need to put yourself out there. You will experience growth from this. The thing I talked about before with outstanding performance, I just sort of had a punt, figured I would give it a go, and as it turns out, I've really been enjoying it. The quiz nights are another thing that I didn't really have a lot of experience doing, but now I've gotten confident enough doing it that I can pitch it to new venues, and even just hosting the quiz nights has helped my confidence a little bit. This is a great situation. I was talking to the quiz host. We're setting up a new quiz at a new venue, and in the early days, sometimes you don't have a lot of team members, so you walk around with the quiz sheets and you ask people at the tables if they'd like to play. And I asked the host if he would like to do that, and he said something about, I'd like to, but I'm socially awkward. And so I thought, oh yeah, I'll do it then. So I wandered around, walked up to the tables, asked people, said hello, asked them if they wanted to play, and the me from a few years ago would never be able to just approach strangers and do that. So you'll experience growth in unexpected ways by putting yourself out there. You often need to spend money to make money. That's another one I've got there. This is one thing I've learned with just doing fringe festivals is, God, they're expensive to go to. You got to pay upwards of $200 to just be in the fringe festival. And then on top of that, you got to pay for your flights and your accommodation, and then all your promo on top of that. And that's one thing. This sort of goes with, excuse me, this goes with another bit that maybe I should have spent more time talking about. But as a performer, I've noticed you always have to be thinking 6 months ahead, and because that's usually when the sign up window. I'm really losing my train of thought here. The sign up window for quiz. Oh God, what is going on with me? Fringe festivals. The sign up window for fringe festivals is about 6 months ahead of the actual festivals. I mean, it makes sense. You can't just you can't just turn up on the day and be like, yeah, I want to do a show. But that's one thing I'm really bad at. So we're talking about the whole routine thing. And I quite like taking each day as it comes. But this means I'm really bad at thinking okay, so it's October now. The Auckland Fringe registration just opened up. I should be applying for that now, booking my flights now, booking my accommodation now, so that I can then go do it in 6 months. But that's been tough. That's something I need to get better at. So, you got to spend money to make money, and you've got to think long term. Next one, you'll really quickly learn the value of your work, and hearing no will no longer be devastating. I think performers in the beginning, especially, find it really hard to ask for money for their performances, for their events. And let me tell you, when you're depending on that for literally to pay your bills, that apprehension to talk about money goes away real fucking quick. And this is something you won't even need to work on. It'll just happen by you negotiating with venues. And just remember, if you're a performer putting on an event, quiz night, comedy night, bingo, whatever it is, just remember, they wouldn't even be talking to you if they... This is the thing with negotiations as well, is it's all about perception. You talk about like value, like what is the value of a quiz night, and you think, well, the value is whatever somebody is willing to pay for it and feels comfortable paying for it. And so like, yeah, you need to remember, you wouldn't even be having the conversation if the venue manager, owner, etc. Didn't feel like there was some value in what you're providing. They wouldn't take a meeting with you just for the hell of it. Like, they're too busy, they're too overworked to be just taking meetings for no reason. So remember that you're already off onto a good foot. They obviously have a quieter night of the week that they would like your help in putting on an event to bring more people into their establishment. And the reason they're talking to you is because you possess skills and connections and whatever else that they don't possess. So hence they're willing to pay you to put it on. So just always remember that you are performing you're doing something that they, a lot of them I think they could put on a comedy night, they could put on a quiz night, whatever. But again, you wouldn't even be in the fucking room if that was possible. So just remember, you are in a good position to start off with. You'll definitely get people that try to haggle you down, try to like, they'll basically dangle it over you with like, well, we can't afford to do it if it's going to cost that much. And then honestly, your response in that situation needs to be like, no worries, I understand. Give me a call if you decide to change your mind. I recently had a place sort of try to like twist my arm into giving them a quiz night that was, how do I word this? When places put on a fundraiser, they charge tickets. So as a person who puts on events, you have to factor that into what you charge them. Because if you're just putting on a free event, you're going to charge them less because like they're not charging people to come to your event. If that makes sense. So like it all depends on what the cost is to the actual customer at the end. And I recently had a place try and twist my arm into giving them a quiz for the price of a free quiz night, but they also wanted to put on auctions and sell tickets for $20 each and yada, yada, yada. And they essentially used that line of like, well, we're not going to do it if it's this price, to which I went, cool. Like, what difference does it make to me? Like, you're getting, yeah. So just this will just come from negotiating with terrorists. God, that's too harsh. They're not terrorists. But you'll get better at this, and again, when you hear no from a place, it's not going to destroy your soul anymore like it does in the early days. Because so much of business is, like I said, it's all relationships, and you've probably all been in a situation where you like someone, they like you, but due to your personal situations, it doesn't work out for whatever reason, distance, your schedules don't line up, whatever it is, and that's a lot like working with a venue. Sometimes you just simply cannot find a day that works for you both. You can't find a price that works for you both. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. But again, if they're worth maintaining the bridge for, then absolutely keep the bridge when you agree to go your separate ways. All right, we're coming up on the home stretch now. So you will probably still have a lot of sleepless nights. And this comes back to the highs and lows, comes back to the... you'll wonder if you made the right decision by doing this, all that sort of stuff. And one thing that I noticed when I quit my job is I started to sleep way better. Like my sleep improved dramatically straight away. But then lately, like I said before, we're approaching leaner times. We are approaching the sort of the famine end of the feast and famine scale. I've noticed that my sleep is suffering. I'm finding it harder to fall asleep at night. I don't feel like I'm sleeping as well as I used to. So this is something I need to look into, and I need to figure out kind of how to manage it. Maybe something like meditation could be the key there. I'm not too sure just yet. I don't want to go the pharmaceutical route. I think where possible, you want to go for a natural kind of solution to whatever stress and sort of mental problems you have, if possible. They might not always be possible though. But yeah, the self-doubt just creep in. You start to wonder, have I made a huge mistake by doing this? But I think ultimately, this is natural. I think, how many nights did I have sleepless when I was at my job, feeling like I was in a cage, not feeling fulfilled by it, and all that sort of thing. So just keep it in perspective, I guess. Like, yes, you're going to have sleepless nights, but like, let's be honest, I had hella sleepless nights when I was working 9 to 5. So it's I think I might need to be asking myself, as T Swizzle would say, "Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me." All right, so this is the last one, and I wanted to end on a high because there's a lot of frustration in this life. It's not all smooth sailing. It's very unpredictable. It's very there's a lot of stuff that's out of your hands that you try as you might. It doesn't matter how organized you are. It doesn't matter how on the ball you are. You're still relying on other people for a lot of it. But I think at the end of the day, there's something to be said for the satisfaction of knowing that you've been paying your bills for a year off the back of, for me, talking into a microphone, telling jokes into a microphone, reading quiz questions off, all that kind of thing. And, I don't want to get too sentimental about it, but that's one of the things that I think about when I'm having those sleepless nights, and I think to myself, did I make the right decision? Should I pack it in and get a day job? Just have to remind myself. I think a lot of these issues that I've talked about can be managed by reminding yourself or by keeping things in perspective. Like, when you think, did I make the right decision? You think, well, I'm stressed right this minute, but I was stressed at my last job as well, and I didn't feel like I was fulfilled at all coming home from that place. And I when I'm not being kept up by, I guess, like stressing over ticket sales and stuff, I do sleep a lot more soundly than I used to. I'm sure it's the same if you're an artist. Imagine that first paycheck that you get from, DeviantArt commissions or, whatever it is. It is just, there's something satisfying. And I know this is not for everyone. I know a lot of people have turned their passion into a job, and it completely sucked the joy of it. But I've not had that experience. I definitely enjoy what I do immensely. I think for me the hang-ups are just the unreliability of it, and the fact that the money is not super consistent, especially in little old Christchurch in New Zealand. But yes, it is tremendously satisfying to pay for stuff off the back of quiz nights, comedy, emceeing, bingo, all that sort of fun stuff. Like, I just bought this bicycle, and it's the it's the bike that yapping into a mic bought. All right, well, I think I've finished my list, and I've rambled on for a little longer than I anticipated doing in this episode. I think it's going to come in at about an hour. Hope you've enjoyed listening, and I hope it's answered some of the questions. I'm always happy to chat about going full-time in your creative endeavor. So if you're a fledgling full-time battler like myself and you want to have a chat, you got some more questions, maybe I didn't quite answer your question about this kind of life for the last year, then as always, flick me a DM on Facebook or Instagram. I'm always happy to talk shop about this sort of thing. Only plug I've got to get in is follow me on YouTube and TikTok. YouTube, because at the time that this podcast drops, I will have recorded my first ever proper hour-long comedy special, Rudzilla, on the weekend. At the time of this recording, I am hella stressing about ticket sales, but I think we might be okay. We're going to get at least enough people to go ahead with the show. So follow me on YouTube. It'll be dropping there when it's all been edited and put together. And then follow me on TikTok, where I post skits and other funny things pretty much every day. Well, all right, that's all from me. I appreciate you listening. Appreciate you sticking with us to this point of the podcast. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you very, very soon next Monday for another episode of Riddle Me This. Thank you for listening to Riddle Me This.
Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddle her out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.